They often say that behind every successful man, there's a woman who rolls her eyes. All right? And she's out there rolling her eyes when she heard that introduction. The reason they asked me to speak partly was because my wife and I took 12 students to Italy this summer for a study abroad. And the main reason I took them was because I wanted them to experience Europe. And the kind of Europe, is not loud enough? Is that better? Okay. The kind of Europe where you see socialism and businesses that have no motivation to operate. I brought in some special speakers to speak to these students, and one of them was an economist for the European Union. I'm going to move this over a little bit so I can see my notes without standing behind that thing. He started right off, and he made sure that we knew he was anti-American. I've got some of the quotes that he gave to us as we stood there and listened to him. These 12 students and I from Ohio here. He said, you think that in the U.S., that it's a criticism to say that President Obama is a socialist. We think it's a compliment. We believe in the rest of the world that a socialist is good and we are pleased. He said, you people in America don't realize that the government are the people who need to make the decisions. Does this sound like Tea Party material? No. Then he went on to say, everybody loves your President Obama. We hate McCain, and we especially hate those Tea Party fools. Nice guy, huh? Then he went on to say, you know, Barack Obama had to buy General Motors in order to bring your businesses up to the 21st century. It was about that time one of my students wanted to kill him. All right? And matter of fact, I saw her in class yesterday, and she said, you know that guy in Italy, I cannot stop thinking about him. I would like to kill him. All right? Finally, he said, if you call me, or most people in Europe, a socialist, we say thank you. Now, think about where we might be headed. America tends to innovate, to create things, to come up with great inventions. I love my Apple iPhone. Who invented that? All of us that are using the internet. Who invented it? Besides Al Gore. All right? Americans. You just go on and on and on about the amount of inventions that we have made. But what comes from Europe? Lenin, Marx, socialism, communism. They import their ideas. And unfortunately, and this is why they asked me to speak to you today, you have to look to the east to see what's coming to the west. And for lots of us who are Christians, we go to Europe and we see no one going to church. We see 2 or 3% say that they believe in God. So we've got socialism, we've got running businesses, we got their beliefs and or lack of beliefs and faith coming at us. We talked to one small business owner and she said, you know, I would really like to add a couple more employees, but I can't because I only get, she was an American living in Rome and she was running the English Yellow Pages in Rome. There are 300,000 native English speakers in Rome. There are 4 million people and 300,000 of them are native English speakers. And she said, I've got 2 employees, I'd like to add 2 more, but I can't. Because the only work hours I get are about 60% of the work hours you get out of an employee in the States. Then she said, once you hire an employee, you can only keep, if you try to let them go, if your business goes down, it takes you 2 years to fire them or let them go, and you have to pay them for 2 years. So, we hear that the unemployment rate is much lower in Europe. It's because they can't let their people go. So the last 2 years, they've been just over there paying them the unemployment, but they're still on the job. She also commented, as did many other businesses to us, they tax everything that moves there. For instance, she commented, if I put a sign on the front of my business, they tax me. But if I put the sign perpendicular to my business, they hit me with more taxes than you can shake a stick at. She says everything is taxed. There are no discount stores in Italy. There are no Walmarts. There's no discount because they won't let them come in. So the prices are high. There's no competition. And Italy is going bankrupt, as is Greece, as is Spain, as is Portugal. One of the students, we were walking along, and he said, you know what's really great about Italy? And I go, what's that? He said, you don't have to pay any taxes on the things that you buy. And I said, you think you're not paying taxes? He said, yeah. If I pay 10 euros, the equivalent of about $12, for something, I pay no tax. There's no tax on it. I said, you pay 20% tax. Everything is marked up 20%. It's just not split out like a line item. It was a shock to him. And why do they do this? You know, I think many of you remember in the spring, Congress was talking about a VAT tax. Because when you put a VAT tax on, it's not a line item like sales tax. It's built into the price. So when you go to pay for it, you think the business is charging too much. It's a way for the government to hide that they're taxing you. All right? So if you hear VAT or any tax that sounds like a VAT, just understand that that's increased taxes. A gallon of gasoline in Rome is $6.50, the equivalent. Of that $6.50, $4.75 of it is tax. All right? You see where they're headed? They're going to tax everything because Italy right now, its debt is 122% of their gross domestic profit. Our product. You know what ours is? A few years ago, it was like 40. It is now 93% federal debt of our gross domestic product. That means the federal government owes as much almost as we produce in this country for every man, woman, and child in business. Are we on our way towards European bankruptcy? Sure. One of the reasons that we were criticizing, the students and I, some of the speakers, is because their idea of socialism is so rampant there that they don't even recognize what it is. So, let's take a look at the United States. Where do we see socialism? Socialism means that the government owns or regulates the means of production. Now, I do sound like a college professor, I realize. But what it means is they have that kind of control. So recently, did the federal government take over 12% of our economy? What's it called? Healthcare. All right? You should see the regulations. I get a legal notice once a week from a big law firm in Columbus telling us, oh, we found this in the 2,000 pages, and this is going to cost you this. We now own General Motors. We've had 13 months of over 9.5% unemployment. That is the longest streak of unemployment at that rate since the Great Depression. And that was in the 1930s. The top 10% of our wage earners in America pay 70% of all income taxes. But they only make 40% of the income. And yet we have a president that's saying, and Democrats and Pelosi saying, the wealthy need to pay their fair share. But they're already paying 70% on only 40% of the income. We have 40% of the people in this country, lots of them, sure, don't make much money, but they pay no income tax at all. We have what's called the highest progressive income tax rate in the world. When you go from bottom to top, the United States charges more income tax than any nation in the world. Now, who's telling you this stuff? Is President Obama? Is Nancy Pelosi telling you this? I don't think so. While we were there, and it's going on right now, Italy went on strike, France went on strike, and one other country went on strike because they were raising the retirement age for people. What is the retirement age in the United States? 65, 67, depending, you hope. In Italy, it was 55, and they were raising it to 60. And the people were going on strike. In France, they were trying to raise it from 60 to 62, and they stopped all the transportation and all the buses. Greece is totally on strike because they're trying to do things like that. Most European countries blame the United States for our problems. But where did it come from? It came from them, this socialism.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I really am. There's a gentleman over here in the white van that has a vehicle parked behind them. I think it's a gold-colored Yukon. He needs to get out. If there's anyone that owns that vehicle, could you please move it? I'm sorry, thank you.
That's all right. We'll call the Italian government to move it. It'll be moved next week. Now, let me tell you a little story. Listen to this. And I want to see how many of you begin to identify this. If you know who the person is, let me see you raise your hand. There was a man from another country, another continent. He was very, very intelligent. And he was sent to Harvard University. And he became an economist for his country. He was a philanderer, had 4 wives and 8 children. He also drove many times. He killed one person, and in one accident, when he was driving drunk, he ended up having his legs amputated. And finally, he killed himself when he drunk drove into a tree later on. And he wrote a lot of different things that we can still find. And his view was that Europe and the U.S. were imperialist nations, guilty of global domination and destruction. So now you know what he thinks about America. He believed that governments should confiscate private business, private land, and raise the taxes on the wealthy up to 100% because they have too much already. He believed that the government should redistribute the income. He was a socialist, or maybe even a communist. He believed that capitalism and free enterprise was just an excuse for economic plunder. Now, this man was not in his son's life very much, but he taught his son that the rich oppress people and that profits is just a sign of ripping people off. He said the U.S. should share its sovereignty with every other nation in the world and subject itself to global governance. Anybody know who this man was? Barack Obama's dad, Barack Hussein Obama. Well, just because the father thought these things, does it mean the son thinks these things?
Yeah.
Oh, it does? Okay. President Obama wrote a book in '95 called The Dreams from My Father, not the dreams of my father. And here's a direct quote from President Obama's book. It was into my father's image, the black man, son of Africa, that I packed all the attributes I sought in myself. My father's voice had nevertheless remained untainted, inspiring, rebuking, granting and withholding approval. Does this explain anything we're seeing? President Obama said that he wants to raise taxes on the wealthy. I mentioned earlier, the top 10% pay 70% of the income taxes. We have the highest tax rate in the world. A lot of people hear about Sweden and some of these others, but when you take the figures, take the brackets, the U.S. is paying the highest income tax rate in the world.